My name is Madeline Wilson, 28, and until last Tuesday, I was just another waitress at the Silver Spoon in Manhattan, struggling to make ends meet. Then an elderly gentleman left me a $70,000 tip and died that same night. I thought the money would solve my problems, but it was just the beginning of a journey that would break my heart, restore my faith, and change my life forever. Before I tell you how this extraordinary encounter unfolded, take a moment to like and subscribe. Where would you be watching from if a stranger left you a fortune? Let me know in the comments below. Life before that fateful Tuesday was a constant uphill battle. Despite having a bachelor's degree in early childhood education, I was serving overpriced steaks to people who spent more on wine than my monthly rent. Not exactly the dream I had when I graduated 6 years ago with $78,000 in student loan debt. My tiny studio apartment in Queens was barely big enough for me, let alone sharing it with my roommate Rachel. The walls were thin enough to hear every argument our neighbors had, and the shower alternated between scalding and freezing with no warning. But at $1,700 a month split 2 ways, it was the best we could manage in New York. What made everything harder was my mom's multiple sclerosis diagnosis 3 years ago. The insurance covered the basics, but the medications that actually helped with her symptoms were conveniently labeled experimental and cost nearly $1,200 a month. Every extra penny I made went straight to her care, and it still wasn't enough. Then there was the Tyler disaster. After dating for 2 years, I found him with my friend Amber at a bar downtown, his hand on her thigh and his tongue down her throat. When confronted, he had the audacity to blame me for being too busy with work and my mom to give him the attention he deserved. It had been 3 months since that night, but the betrayal still stung. The Silver Spoon was my financial lifeline, even if it wasn't my passion. Nestled in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, it catered to Wall Street executives, celebrities, and the occasional foreign diplomat. The menu didn't list prices. If you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Their signature dessert was a gold-dusted chocolate soufflé that cost $200 and had a waiting list. A single bottle from their wine cellar could go for over $1,000. Working there was like being in a theater production every night. We wore crisp black uniforms with bow ties, memorized extensive wine descriptions, and learned to be invisible until needed. The training lasted 2 weeks and covered everything from the correct angle to serve from, always the right, to the proper way to fold a napkin when a guest left the table, in a perfect triangle, never a rectangle. Chef Marcus ran the kitchen with military precision. He was demanding and temperamental, but fair. He'd scream about improperly plated dishes but would also slip us incredible staff meals when we had rough days. Jessica, the manager who took a chance on me despite my limited fine dining experience, maintained the delicate balance between the demanding clientele and the stressed staff. Then there was Brian, another server who'd become a good friend. A struggling actor with his own mountain of debt, he'd been at the Silver Spoon for 5 years and showed me the ropes when I started. He called our job performing for tips and had mastered the art of making guests feel important while subtly encouraging larger gratuities. That Tuesday started like many others, terribly. I woke up late after covering a double shift the day before, spilled coffee on my uniform, and had to change. The student loan company had left another voicemail about my late payment. The subway was delayed, making me nearly late for pre-shift meeting. Jessica gave me a concerned look but didn't say anything as I slipped into place beside Brian. "Rough morning," he whispered as Chef Marcus went through the specials. "Just the usual," I replied, straightening my bow tie. "Nothing a couple hundred in tips won't fix." If only I'd known how prophetic those words would be. The lunch service was standard, a mix of business meetings and ladies who lunched, averaging about 20% tips. I was scheduled for a double that day, so I took a quick break at 4:30, sitting in the alley behind the restaurant with my feet up to reduce the swelling. Brian brought me a staff meal of pasta with the sauce chef had been working on for tomorrow's special. "You look beat," he said, leaning against the wall. "Your mom okay?" "Same as always," I said, twirling pasta around my fork. "The new neurologist thinks there's a treatment that might help more, but of course, it's not covered." "Of course," Brian nodded. Rich people get healthy, poor people get thoughts and prayers. I laughed despite myself. When did you get so cynical? Somewhere between my 500th "the customer is always right" and my 1000th "yes, sir, exceptional choice." I finished my meal quickly as Jessica poked her head out the back door. "Maddie, table 7 just got seated in your section." "Older gentleman, alone." I nodded, standing up and straightening my uniform. "Duty calls." "Go get him," Brian said with a wink. "Maybe he's a secret millionaire looking to change a server's life." We both laughed at the absurdity of it. If only we'd known. When I approached table 7, my first impression was how ordinary he looked compared to our usual clientele. No designer suit, no flashy watch, no entourage. Just an elderly gentleman in a well-worn but clearly once expensive navy suit, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the menu. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his hands showed age spots but were steady as he folded the menu closed when I approached. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Silver Spoon. My name is Madeline, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with something from the bar?" He looked up at me with the kindest blue eyes I'd ever seen. They crinkled at the corners when he smiled, suggesting a lifetime of laughter, but there was something else there too, a sadness that seemed to hover just beneath the surface. "Just water for me, thank you, Madeline. With lemon, if you don't mind." His voice was gentle but clear, with the refined accent of old New York money, not showy, just quietly confident. I nodded and returned quickly with his water, reciting the evening specials as I'd done hundreds of times before. "I'll have the halibut," he said, handing me the menu. "And a side of the roasted vegetables. Nothing too complicated." It was a modest order by our standards. Most single diners ordered multiple courses and wine pairings. As I turned to place his order, he spoke again. "Madeline? That's a lovely name. Do people call you Maddie?" The question caught me off guard. Customers rarely asked personal questions, and when they did, it was usually the creepy kind. But there was nothing inappropriate in his tone, just genuine interest. "Yes, most people do. Except my mom when I'm in trouble," I replied with a small smile. He chuckled. "I had a niece called Maddie. She was sharp as a tack, too." "I can tell you are." I thanked him and went to place his order, feeling strangely seen in a way customers rarely bothered with. When I returned to check on him, he surprised me again. "If you don't mind my asking, what brought you to the Silver Spoon? You strike me as someone with bigger ambitions than serving overpriced fish to old men like me." Normally, I'd give a vague, pleasant response to such questions, but something about his genuine interest made me answer honestly. "Student loans and medical bills, mostly. I actually have a degree in early childhood education." "Ah, a teacher," he nodded approvingly. "One of the most important professions, yet so undervalued in our society. Do you miss it?" "Teaching, I mean." "I never really got started," I admitted, refilling his water. "The pay for entry-level positions barely covered my loan payments, let alone helping my mom with her medical expenses. Here, I make triple what I would in a classroom." He nodded thoughtfully. "The unfortunate arithmetic of our times. May I ask what you would do if money wasn't an issue?" The question seemed hypothetical, not presumptuous, so I found myself answering. "I'd open my own preschool," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the answer came. "For underprivileged kids, with scholarships for those who can't afford quality early education. Something that combines learning through play, arts, and nature. The kind of place that could change the trajectory of a child's life before they even start kindergarten." I felt my cheeks flush, embarrassed at having shared so much with a complete stranger. "I'm sorry, that was probably more than you wanted to know." "Not at all," he said, his eyes lighting up. "It's refreshing to hear someone with such clarity of purpose. Tell me more about this dream school of yours." And somehow, between serving his main course and checking on his vegetables, I found myself describing my vision in detail: the natural light classrooms, the outdoor garden where children would grow vegetables, the art studio with real materials, not just crayons and construction paper. He asked thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely listening, not just being polite. "What's stopping you?" he asked finally. "Besides the obvious financial hurdles." I considered the question. "Fear, I suppose. Of failing. Of letting down the kids and families who would count on me. It's one thing to have a dream, another to be responsible for making it work." He nodded slowly. "Fear is a wise counselor but a poor master. Dreams matter more than most people realize, Madeline. They're the blueprints of a better world." The conversation shifted then, as he asked about my mother's condition with the knowledge of someone familiar with MS. He spoke briefly of his late wife, mentioning with a sad smile that they'd been married 47 years before cancer took her. As the evening progressed, I noticed him observing everything, complimenting the busboy who quickly cleaned up a dropped fork, nodding approvingly when I helped an elderly couple read the menu in the dimmed lighting. He seemed to actually see the invisible work that kept the restaurant running. When he finished his meal, declining dessert with a pat to his stomach and a wry smile, I brought his check, $120.14 for the food, which was actually modest by our standards. What happened next changed everything. When I returned to collect the payment, he'd placed his credit card, a simple black one, not the ostentatious platinum or gold cards our regular clientele favored, on top of the leather folder. When I processed the payment and brought back the receipt for signature, I nearly dropped the folder. In the tip line, he had written $70,000. The total read $70,120.14. I stared at it, certain I was misreading. Perhaps he meant $70? But the number of zeros was unmistakable. "Sir," I said quietly, returning to his table, "I think there may have been a mistake with the tip amount." He looked up at me with those kind blue eyes and shook his head. "No mistake, Madeline. You've earned it." "But sir, this is $70,000, I whispered, my hands trembling. "I'm aware of the amount," he said calmly. "I've been fortunate in my life, and I believe in investing in people with purpose. Sometimes we get second chances through others." He stood then, retrieving a business card from his wallet and pressing it into my palm. It was simple white cardstock with just a phone number printed in the center. "No name, no company. Call this number tomorrow. There are a few things I'd like to discuss with you about that preschool." I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. "Make good use of it, Madeline," he said, squeezing my hand gently. "The world needs more people like you." And with that, he walked out of the Silver Spoon and into the New York night, leaving me holding a receipt that would change my life forever. "Jessica," I called, rushing to the manager's office, receipt clutched in my hand. "Jessica, I need you to see this." She looked up from the inventory spreadsheet with irritation that quickly turned to concern when she saw my face. "What's wrong? Did someone harass you?" I wordlessly handed her the receipt. She glanced at it, then did a double take, adjusting her glasses as if they were malfunctioning. "Is this real?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted. He seemed completely serious. "Said I'd earned it." Jessica immediately reached for the phone, calling the credit card company to verify the transaction. I stood there in a daze, staring at the business card he'd given me, running my thumb over the embossed number. After several minutes of back and forth, Jessica hung up, looking stunned. "It's legitimate. The charge went through. The account has sufficient funds." The way she said it suggested sufficient was a massive understatement. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," Jessica said, still looking shell-shocked, "we process it like any other tip. It'll be included in your next paycheck, minus the shared portion for support staff." Word spread through the restaurant like wildfire. Chef Marcus emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, demanding to see the receipt himself. The reactions from my coworkers ranged from genuine excitement to barely concealed envy. "Who was this guy?" Brian asked, examining the signature on the receipt. "Maxwell Harrington?" Name sounds familiar. I shrugged. Just an older gentleman. Very kind. We talked about education and my mom. Brian raised an eyebrow. You got a $70,000 tip for talking about education? I've been giving the wrong kind of service. It wasn't like that, I insisted, feeling defensive. It was a real conversation. He seemed, I don't know, genuinely interested. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I kept touching the receipt in my pocket, half afraid it would disappear if I didn't keep checking. When I finally clocked out at 11 p.m., I called my mom from the subway platform, hands still shaking. Mom? I said when she answered, voice thick with emotion. Something incredible happened tonight. I told her everything, from the conversation to the tip, while pacing the nearly empty platform. She was silent for so long I thought we'd lost connection. Mom? Are you there? I'm here, sweetie, she said, her voice trembling. I'm just processing. This is life-changing money. I know, I said, tears welling up. Your treatments, my loans, we could actually get ahead. We talked until my train came, making plans late into the night after I got home. For the first time in years, I fell asleep feeling hopeful about the future. That hope lasted exactly 8 hours. I woke to my alarm at 7 a.m., groggy but still riding the high of the previous night. I shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee, flipping on the small TV on the counter for background noise as I measured the grounds. Breaking news this morning, the anchor was saying. Billionaire philanthropist Maxwell Harrington was found dead in his Manhattan penthouse. The coffee canister slipped from my hands, scattering grounds across the floor as I stared at the screen in horror. They showed a photo of a familiar face, the kind blue eyes, the silver hair. My customer from table 7. Harrington, 78, appears to have died of natural causes, likely a heart attack, according to sources close to the family. The reclusive billionaire, who made his fortune in sustainable energy development, was known for his philanthropic work, though he shunned publicity in recent years following the tragic deaths of his wife and daughter in a boating accident 15 years ago. I sank into a kitchen chair, unable to process what I was hearing. The gentle, unassuming man who'd sat at my table less than 12 hours ago was a billionaire? And now he was dead? The report continued with details of his business empire and charitable foundation, but all I could think about was his final words to me, sometimes we get second chances through others. Had he known? Had he felt something was wrong? A cold wave of guilt washed over me. Had the excitement of giving such an enormous tip triggered his heart attack? Was I somehow responsible? With trembling fingers, I pulled out the business card he'd given me and dialed the number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail, a generic automated message with no name or personal greeting. I hung up without leaving a message, unsure what to say. I tried 3 more times throughout the morning with the same result. I called Jessica at the restaurant, who confirmed she'd heard the news. The police might contact us, she said. Apparently, dining at the Silver Spoon was his last public activity before, you know. What about the tip? I asked, feeling awkward even bringing it up. The payment cleared, Jessica assured me. As far as we're concerned, it's a legitimate gratuity. But given the circumstances. I understand, I said quickly. It just feels strange now. For the next several days, I existed in a state of limbo. The tip money remained unspent in my account as I tried unsuccessfully to reach someone at the number Mr. Harrington had given me. I scoured news articles about him, learning about his remarkable life, from his early innovations in wind turbine design to his private funding of educational initiatives in underserved communities. The more I learned, the more confused I became about why he'd chosen me for such generosity. According to the articles, he'd become increasingly reclusive after losing his family, focusing on business and anonymous charitable giving. One longtime associate was quoted saying, Max gave away millions, but never wanted his name on anything. He believed true charity happened in the shadows. Had our conversation about education struck a chord? Was it just a wealthy man's final impulsive act of kindness? I would soon learn the truth was far more complicated and painful than I could have imagined. A week after Mr. Harrington's death, life had begun returning to a strange new normal. The media coverage had dwindled, replaced by speculation about his vast fortune and who would inherit it. I'd kept the tip money untouched, still uncertain if I should use it given the circumstances of his passing. At the restaurant, I'd become something of a celebrity. Customers requested my section, perhaps hoping some of that generous tipping magic would rub off on them. My coworkers' reactions ranged from genuine happiness for me to barely concealed resentment. Brian remained steadfastly supportive, while Jessica seemed concerned about the attention it brought to the restaurant. "Any more $1 million tippers I should seat in your section?" she asked one afternoon, only half joking. I was in the middle of my lunch shift when my phone vibrated with an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me ask Jessica for a quick break to answer it. "Is this Madeline Wilson?" a crisp, formal voice inquired. "Yes, speaking," I replied, pressing the phone closer to my ear to hear over the restaurant noise. "This is James Whitfield, senior partner at Whitfield, Brennan and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Maxwell Harrington. We need to meet with you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. It's a matter of some urgency." My heart raced. "Is this about the tip he left me?" "Among other matters," he replied without elaboration. "Our offices are at 745 Fifth Avenue, 38th floor. Please be prompt." Before I could ask any more questions, he ended the call. I stood there in the service corridor, trying to process this development. Was this about the business card, the conversation about my preschool dream? Had Mr. Harrington mentioned me in his will? When I told Jessica about the meeting, she immediately gave me the day off. This could be big, Maddie. Much bigger than a tip. That night, I barely slept, alternating between exciting fantasies about funding for my preschool and anxiety that something was wrong with the tip transaction. By morning, I'd changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a modest navy dress I'd worn to job interviews, the most professional thing I owned. The law firm's offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper overlooking Central Park. The reception area featured marble floors, leather furniture, and abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. The receptionist, a perfectly coiffed woman in her 50s, gave me a look that made me feel like I'd tracked in something unpleasant. "Madeline Wilson for James Whitfield," I said, trying to project confidence. "Yes," she replied, her voice as cold as the marble beneath my feet. "They're expecting you in conference room C, 3rd door on the right." The conference room was intimidating, a massive mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. 3 people were already seated, an older man I presumed was James Whitfield, a younger attorney with a laptop, and a sharp-looking woman whose expensive suit screamed financial advisor. "Ms. Wilson, thank you for coming," Whitfield said without standing. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, acutely aware of my department store dress among their designer wear. No one offered me coffee or water. "I'm James Whitfield, executor of Mr. Harrington's estate," he continued. "This is my associate, David Porter, and Ms. Eleanor Reeves, the family's financial advisor." "It's nice to meet you all," I said, my mouth dry. I was very sorry to hear about Mr. Harrington's passing. He seemed like a wonderful man. "Did he?" Whitfield asked, raising an eyebrow. "In your brief interaction as his server?" The tone caught me off guard. We actually had quite a meaningful conversation about education and... "Ms. Wilson," Whitfield interrupted, "let me be direct. We're here to discuss the irregularity regarding your gratuity." "Irregularity?" I repeated. Whitfield exchanged glances with his colleagues before continuing. Mr. Harrington had been experiencing episodes of confusion in his final months. This was not public knowledge, but he occasionally made financial decisions that were not aligned with his usual judgment. My stomach dropped. "Are you saying the tip was a mistake?" "We believe so, yes," the financial advisor interjected. Mr. Harrington had no history of such extreme tipping behavior. We believe he may have intended a more standard amount, perhaps $70 or $700, and became confused with the decimal places. But he seemed completely lucid, I protested. We had a detailed conversation about educational approaches, about my mother's medical condition. He asked thoughtful questions. There was no sign of confusion whatsoever. These episodes could be quite subtle, Whitfield said, his tone condescending. The confusion might not have been apparent to someone without medical training, particularly someone who stood to benefit from it. The implication stung. I didn't take advantage of him. I even questioned the amount when I saw it. Porter, the younger attorney, slid a document across the table. This is a formal request for the return of the funds, minus a reasonable tip of $500, which the family feels is more than generous. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling slightly. Do I legally have to return it? The alternative would be a lengthy court battle, Whitfield said, leaning forward. Given Mr. Harrington's documented medical history and the extreme nature of the amount, I think you'll find any judge would side with the estate. That process would involve considerable legal fees on your part, Ms. Wilson. I felt sick. They were taking away the lifeline I'd barely had time to grasp. He gave me his business card, I said weakly. He told me to call about discussing my preschool idea. That doesn't sound confused to me. The three of them exchanged knowing glances that made my skin crawl. Ms. Wilson, Whitfield said slowly, as if explaining to a child, Maxwell Harrington was worth over $3 billion. He had a team of investment advisors and a charitable foundation with hundreds of employees. The idea that he would fund a preschool based on a conversation with a waitress is, frankly, delusional. The cruelty of his words felt like a physical blow. I sat there, blinking back tears, as Porter pushed a pen toward me. We'll need your signature acknowledging the error and agreeing to return the funds within 3 business days. What choice did I have? I couldn't afford a legal battle against a billionaire's estate. With a shaking hand, I signed the document, feeling as if I were signing away not just money but my dreams as well. The $500 tip will be processed separately, Whitfield said, gathering the papers. We appreciate your cooperation in this unfortunate matter. And just like that, the meeting was over. No one stood to shake my hand or see me out. I walked through the marble lobby with my head down, not wanting the receptionist to see the tears streaming down my face. Outside, the spring sunshine felt like a mockery. 20 minutes ago, I'd had $70,000 and a future full of possibilities. Now I was back to square one, with the added humiliation of being treated like a scammer who'd taken advantage of a confused old man. As I descended in the elevator, I couldn't shake the memory of Mr. Harrington's clear blue eyes, the thoughtfulness of his questions, the deliberate way he'd written that amount on the receipt. Nothing about our interaction suggested confusion or impaired judgment. Something wasn't right, but I had no idea what to do about it. 3 days after the devastating meeting at the law firm, I'd transferred the money back to the estate, keeping only the insulting $500 reasonable tip they'd allowed. I'd had to explain to my mother why the treatments we'd researched would have to wait, why her medication would still be rationed. The disappointment in her eyes, though she tried to hide it, was almost worse than losing the money itself. At work, I moved through my shifts like a ghost, going through the motions without the spark that had always kept me going through difficult times. Jessica noticed, pulling me aside during a slow afternoon. "Everything okay, Maddie? You've been off since that meeting." I explained what had happened, the accusations of taking advantage of a confused old man, the forced return of the money. "That's awful," she said, genuine sympathy in her eyes. "But at least it's over now, right? You can move on." If only it had been that simple. The next morning, my phone exploded with texts from friends and family. "Are you okay? Have you seen the news? Call me ASAP." Confused, I turned on the TV to find my face plastered across the screen of a local news channel. The headline made my blood run cold: "Waitress scams dying billionaire out of $70,000. The reporter, standing outside the Silver Spoon, spoke gravely. Sources close to the Harrington estate claim the server, identified as Madeline Wilson, took advantage of the ailing billionaire during an episode of confusion, accepting a $70,000 tip that Harrington clearly did not intend to give. The family has recovered the funds but is considering pressing charges for elder financial abuse. I sat frozen on my couch, unable to believe what I was hearing. The story painted me as a predatory server who had manipulated a confused old man, contradicting everything about our actual interaction. They showed an unflattering photo of me from social media, my hair messy after a long shift, captioned "the waitress who almost got away with it." My phone rang. It was Jessica. "Maddie, don't come in today," she said, sounding stressed. "The restaurant is swarmed with reporters. I've got people calling for comments, asking if we routinely allow our staff to take advantage of elderly customers." "But that's not what happened," I protested. "Who would leak this?" "I returned the money." "I don't know," Jessica sighed. "But the damage is done. I need you to lay low for a few days until this blows over." But it didn't blow over. By afternoon, the story had gone national. My social media accounts were flooded with hateful messages from strangers. "Gold digger," "elder abuser," "hope you go to jail." Someone leaked my email address, and my inbox filled with vitriol. When I finally worked up the courage to check the news again, the story had evolved. Now they were claiming I had a history of targeting wealthy elderly men, citing anonymous sources at the restaurant. The lies were breathtaking in their creativity and cruelty. That evening, a knock at my door revealed 2 reporters from a tabloid news site. How they found my address, I'll never know. "Madeline Wilson? We'd like to get your side of the story about Maxwell Harrington," one called through the door. I didn't answer, retreating to my bedroom and drawing the blinds. My phone continued to buzz with messages from unknown numbers. Rachel, my roommate, texted that she was staying with her boyfriend until the situation calmed down. The subtext was clear: she didn't want to be associated with the scandal. The next day, I had to venture out for groceries, pulling a baseball cap low over my face. It didn't help. A man with a camera recognized me outside the store. "Ms. Wilson, did you know Maxwell Harrington was ill when you took his money? How many other elderly customers have you scammed?" I ran back to my apartment, abandoning my shopping. Back home, I found a nasty note taped to my door: "Scammers not welcome here." The message was clear: even my neighbors had turned against me. The harassment continued for days. My mother called in tears. Reporters had somehow found her number and were harassing her as well. Brian texted that Jessica had reduced my shifts until things calmed down because customers were requesting not to be served by the scammer. The final straw came a week after the initial news broke. A particularly vicious article appeared online, claiming to have interviewed former coworkers who described me as always looking for a mark and bragging about manipulating elderly customers. The anonymous sources described incidents that never happened, painting me as a calculated predator. I broke down, sobbing on my kitchen floor. My reputation was destroyed. My job was essentially gone. My friends had abandoned me. All because I'd been kind to an old man who'd been kind to me in return. That night, I seriously considered moving to another city, starting over where no one had heard of Madeline Wilson, the waitress who scammed a dying billionaire. I researched cheap apartments in distant states, looked into transferring my server certification. Running away seemed like the only option. Then another call came. This one would change everything. 2 weeks into the media nightmare, I was staying at my mother's small apartment in Queens, hiding from reporters who occasionally still staked out my building. I'd taken a formal leave of absence from the Silver Spoon, though Jessica's tone made it clear I shouldn't expect my job to be waiting for me if I returned. My financial situation was worse than before the whole ordeal started. Without shifts, I had no income, yet the bills kept coming. My mother tried to help, but her disability checks barely covered her own expenses. The few friends who stood by me, primarily Brian, did what they could, but they had their own struggles. The phone rang with yet another unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, assuming it was another reporter or hate call, but something made me answer. "Ms. Wilson?" The voice was familiar, the cold, precise tone of James Whitfield. We need to meet again regarding additional legal matters concerning the Harrington estate. My stomach dropped. I've already returned the money. What more could you possibly want? This is not a matter to discuss over the phone, he replied. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Same location. He hung up before I could refuse. I immediately called Brian, who had become my strongest supporter through the ordeal. They can't make you go, he said when I explained the situation. You don't work for them. What choice do I have? I asked. If I don't show up, they'll probably claim I'm admitting guilt or something. Then I'm coming with you, Brian insisted. You're not facing those vultures alone again. The next morning, we met outside the law firm's building. Brian, dressed in the only suit he owned, kept for auditions, gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before we entered. The reception was even colder than before. This time, we were directed to a larger conference room with an even more impressive view. Whitfield was there, along with Porter and 3 other attorneys I didn't recognize. A man and woman in expensive suits were introduced as representatives of the Harrington family, though no specific relation was mentioned. Your friend will need to wait outside, Whitfield said, eyeing Brian with disdain. I'd prefer he stay, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. This is a private legal matter involving confidential information, Porter interjected. Only parties directly involved may be present. Brian squeezed my shoulder. It's okay. I'll be right outside if you need me. After he left, the atmosphere in the room grew even more tense. Whitfield wasted no time getting to the point. Ms. Wilson, serious concerns have been raised about your interaction with Mr. Harrington on the night of his death. What concerns? I asked. I've already returned the money you claimed was given in error. This goes beyond the tip, one of the new attorneys said. We have reason to believe you may have unduly influenced Mr. Harrington in other ways during your interaction. The family representative, a hard-faced woman with cold eyes, spoke up. Mr. Harrington was a private man who valued his family's reputation. The public spectacle you've created with your claims has caused significant distress to his relatives. The spectacle I created? I was incredulous. I didn't go to the press. Someone from your office leaked a completely false story painting me as a criminal. Regardless of how the information became public, Whitfield continued smoothly, the damage to the Harrington family name is substantial. We're prepared to file a defamation lawsuit for the harmful statements you've made. What harmful statements? I haven't spoken to a single reporter. Porter slid a document across the table. We've prepared a settlement agreement. You'll sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding your interaction with Mr. Harrington and issue a public apology acknowledging your mistake in accepting the excessive tip. In return, the family will not pursue legal action against you. I stared at them in disbelief. You want me to apologize for something I didn't do? After you've already destroyed my reputation and taken away the money he clearly intended to give me? Ms. Wilson, Whitfield said, his voice dangerously low, you seem to misunderstand your position. The Harrington estate has virtually unlimited resources to pursue this matter. You have none. This offer is generous considering the circumstances. While they continued discussing strategy among themselves in hushed tones, I noticed a document partially visible in an open briefcase beside one of the new attorneys. The words Harrington will caught my eye, and as I subtly shifted my position, I could make out what appeared to be my name on one of the pages. The attorney noticed my gaze and snapped the briefcase shut, sliding it away from view. The action was so deliberate, so suspicious, that it confirmed my growing feeling that something wasn't right. They were hiding something, something that involved me. Drawing on courage I didn't know I had, I stood up. I'm not signing anything today. I need to consult with my own attorney first. Whitfield's expression darkened. That would be unwise, Ms. Wilson. Legal representation is expensive, and this offer expires today. Then it expires, I said, gathering my purse. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to apologize for a false narrative that you created. You're making a serious mistake, Porter warned. We can make things very difficult for you. More difficult than you already have? I asked, moving toward the door. I doubt that. As I reached for the handle, Whitfield delivered a final warning. The Harrington family has connections throughout the city, Ms. Wilson. Finding new employment with this hanging over your head will be challenging. I paused, anger finally overtaking fear. Mr. Harrington was kind, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in helping others. Everything I've seen of his family and representatives suggests you never knew him at all. I don't know what you're hiding, but I know it's something. And I'm going to find out what it is. I walked out with my head high, though my knees felt like jelly. Brian jumped up from the waiting area couch, alarmed by my expression. What happened? He asked as we hurried to the elevator. I don't know exactly, I said, jabbing the down button repeatedly. But I think they're hiding something about Mr. Harrington's will. Something that involves me. In the lobby, Brian looked at me with newfound respect. So what do we do now? I don't know, I admitted as we pushed through the revolving doors into the spring sunshine. But I'm done letting them control the narrative. It's time to find out what's really going on. I had no idea how I would accomplish this, with no money for a lawyer and no connections to help me fight against such powerful opponents. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than despair. I felt determined. That night, I tossed and turned on my mother's lumpy pull-out sofa, replaying the confrontation in the law office. What could they be hiding? Why were they so determined to silence me? The questions circled endlessly until I finally drifted into restless sleep around 3 a.m. A sharp knock at the door jolted me awake. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains. I'd slept later than intended. My mother was at a doctor's appointment with a friend, so I approached the door cautiously, still wary of reporters. Who is it? I called, not opening the door. Eleanor Hayes, came the reply. I was Maxwell Harrington's housekeeper for 30 years. We need to talk, Ms. Wilson. I hesitated, suspicious of another trap, but curiosity won out. I opened the door a crack, chain still engaged, to see an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress and carried a worn leather satchel. Her eyes, kind but determined, reminded me so much of Mr. Harrington that I felt an immediate connection. How did you find me? I asked, still cautious. Max kept meticulous records, she replied. Your address was in his notes. May I come in? I shouldn't be seen speaking with you. I unlatched the chain and stepped back. She entered with the careful movements of someone managing arthritic pain, settling into my mother's armchair with a grateful sigh. They're lying to you, she said without preamble. Max was not confused that night. He knew exactly what he was doing. My heart raced. How do you know? She opened her satchel and removed a leather-bound journal. Because he told me. He planned it all, down to the restaurant and the tip amount. She handed me the journal, open to an entry dated the day before our meeting. The handwriting was neat and precise. Arrangements made for dinner at the Silver Spoon tomorrow. Researched the Wilson girl thoroughly, resilient despite significant challenges. Mother with MS, student debt from ECE degree, yet maintains excellent work ethic and reputation for kindness. Reminds me so much of Margaret. The foundation research confirms she has the background and vision to make the project succeed. The tip should provide immediate relief while the larger arrangements are processed. Eleanor disagrees with my approach, but some things must be done personally. I looked up, stunned. He researched me before coming to the restaurant? Why? Max had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3 months ago, Eleanor explained, her voice softening. Terminal. He was given 6 months at most. Instead of spending his final days in hospitals, he decided to personally distribute portions of his wealth to people he believed would use it well. But why me? I asked, still confused. That's a longer story, she said. But first, you should know he was completely lucid until the end. He had occasional pain that required medication, but his mind was sharp as ever. This confusion narrative is a complete fabrication. She pulled more documents from her satchel, medical records showing clear cognitive assessments, daily journal entries that demonstrated sophisticated business analysis and decision-making right up to his death. The night after meeting you, he was excited, Eleanor continued. He said he'd found the perfect person for the education initiative. He made several calls to his attorney, his real attorney, not that snake Whitfield, to ensure everything was arranged properly. But then he died, I said softly. Eleanor nodded, blinking back tears. The doctors had warned us a heart attack was possible given his condition. I found him the next morning, peaceful in his bed. That's when everything started going wrong. She explained how Whitfield and his firm had swooped in, taking control of the estate before Eleanor could contact Mr. Harrington's longtime personal attorney, who was traveling abroad. They'd seized documents, changed locks, and essentially barred Eleanor from the penthouse she'd managed for decades. But the most disturbing thing, she continued, was their suppression of Max's new will. My breath caught. New will? Eleanor nodded grimly. Max had revised his will just 6 weeks ago, after his diagnosis. The previous will, from 10 years ago, left most of his fortune to distant relatives he barely knew and various standard charities. The new will was more personal. She pulled out another document, a copy of a will with a recent date. He'd become disillusioned with traditional philanthropy. He felt his money was being wasted on administration and fundraising galas rather than actually helping people. So his new approach was to leave specific bequests to individuals who had shown kindness or integrity without knowing his wealth or status. My hands trembled as I skimmed the document. There, on the 3rd page, was my name, to Madeline Wilson, waitress at the Silver Spoon, should our meeting confirm my research, the sum of $2 million and ownership of the property at 237 Maple Street, Brooklyn, to establish the early childhood education center she envisions, with an additional annual operating grant of $250,000 for 5 years through the Harrington Foundation. The room seemed to spin around me. This can't be real, I whispered. It's very real, Eleanor assured me. And completely legal. It was properly witnessed and notarized. I have the original in a safe place. Whitfield knows about it, that's what they've been hiding from you. But why would they do this? Isn't it illegal to suppress a valid will? Of course it is, Eleanor said, anger flashing in her eyes. But the relatives named in the old will stand to gain millions more if the new one disappears. And Whitfield's firm would collect substantially higher fees managing the larger estate. They're banking on you not having the resources to fight them. She leaned forward, her expression intense. Max valued authenticity above all else, Ms. Wilson. He watched how you treated every customer in that restaurant, not just him. He saw something genuine in you, just as he did in the others named in his will, a nurse who went above and beyond for him during a hospital stay, a janitor who returned a lost wallet without taking a cent, a teacher who paid for students' lunches out of her own pocket. What do we do now? I asked, overwhelmed by the revelation. Fight, Eleanor said simply. I have a friend, Sophia Martinez. She's an attorney who specializes in estate disputes. She's been looking for a way to take down Whitfield for years. With this evidence and my testimony, we have a case. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Won't they come after you for helping me? Eleanor smiled, a fierce glint in her eye. I'm 75 years old, dear. I've worked for the Harringtons since before Max was married. I have nothing to lose and no one to threaten. Besides, she added, patting my hand, Max protected me too. I have my own bequest that these vultures can't touch. That afternoon, we met with Sophia Martinez in her modest office in Queens, a stark contrast to Whitfield's Manhattan palace. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately inspired confidence. This is textbook will suppression, she declared after reviewing the evidence. Unethical and illegal. The fact that they've tried to intimidate you makes it worse. Can we win? I asked. Sophia's smile was predatory. With Eleanor's testimony, the journal, and the notarized will? Absolutely. The real question is how ugly they'll make it before conceding. We spent hours developing a strategy. Sophia would file emergency petitions with the probate court while gathering statements from restaurant staff about Mr. Harrington's clear mental state during our interaction. Eleanor would provide her contemporaneous notes about his plans and decision-making capacity. They'll attack your character, Sophia warned me. They've already started with the media smears. It will get worse before it gets better. I've lost almost everything already, I replied. My reputation, my job, my apartment. But I'm not letting them take away Mr. Harrington's final wishes too. As I left Sophia's office with Eleanor, the older woman squeezed my hand. Max was right about you. You have the same spirit he did, stubborn in the best possible way. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something I'd almost forgotten: purpose. Whether or not I ultimately received the inheritance, I was determined to expose the truth about the kind man who'd seen something in me worth believing in. The legal battle lasted nearly 7 months, each day bringing new challenges and revelations. Whitfield's firm fought viciously, attempting to discredit Eleanor as a disgruntled employee and me as a manipulative server who had somehow engineered the entire situation. They leaked selective information to the press, tried to intimidate witnesses, and buried us in paperwork. But Sophia was relentless. She countered every move, gradually exposing the web of deception they had woven. The turning point came when she managed to obtain records of communication between Whitfield and the distant relatives named in the old will, emails discussing how to handle the Wilson problem and ensure the new will never sees the light of day. The judge's face during the final hearing said everything. She issued a scathing rebuke of Whitfield's firm for their unconscionable breach of fiduciary duty and ordered the immediate enforcement of the valid will, Maxwell Harrington's true final wishes. The media narrative shifted overnight. Waitress vindicated, Billionaire's true will revealed headlined the same papers that had once painted me as a scammer. Reporters who had harassed me now requested exclusive interviews to tell my side of the story. I declined most, speaking only with a respected journalist who agreed to focus on Mr. Harrington's legacy rather than the scandal. 1 week after the court victory, Eleanor invited me to Mr. Harrington's penthouse, now temporarily under her care as the estate was properly settled. The space was elegant but surprisingly homey, filled with books and photographs rather than ostentatious displays of wealth. He wanted you to have this, she said, handing me a sealed envelope. He wrote it the night after meeting you, with instructions to deliver it when the truth prevails. Alone on the balcony overlooking Central Park, I opened the letter with trembling hands. Dear Madeline. If you're reading this, 2 things have happened: I am gone, and you have proven as determined as I suspected you would be. I owe you an explanation for what must have seemed a bewildering encounter. Your mother, Catherine Wilson, once taught 3rd grade at Westbrook Elementary. 20 years ago, she had a student named Margaret Harrington, my daughter. Maggie was struggling that year, not academically, but emotionally. Her mother had recently been diagnosed with the cancer that would eventually take her life, and Maggie had withdrawn into herself. Your mother noticed. While other teachers saw only a quiet, compliant child, Catherine recognized pain. She stayed after school with Maggie, engaged her in art projects, and gave her the space to express her grief. She even called me, not knowing who I was beyond Maggie's father, to suggest ways I could help my daughter at home. Catherine never knew that the anonymous donation that funded the school's art therapy program the following year came from me. Or that the foundation that has been quietly helping with her medical expenses since her MS diagnosis is one of mine. Life is a circle, Madeline. The kindness your mother showed my daughter has now completed its journey back to you. Maggie wanted to be a teacher before the accident that took both her and her mother from me. The education center I've entrusted to you will fulfill not just your dream, but hers as well. I researched dozens of potential candidates for this project. Your dedication despite overwhelming obstacles, your clear vision, and yes, the way you treated every customer in that restaurant with equal dignity, showed me everything I needed to know about your character. The money is significant, but it is finite. The real inheritance I hope to leave you is purpose. My life's greatest regret is that it took losing everything I loved to understand what truly matters. You already know, I saw it in your eyes when you spoke of the children you hope to teach. Build something meaningful, Madeline. Something that will outlast both of us. With respect and confidence. Maxwell Harrington. I sat on that balcony until the sun set, tears streaming down my face as I processed the incredible connection I never knew existed. When I called my mother that evening, her tearful recollection of sweet little Maggie Harrington and her worry for the girl's father confirmed every word. The property at 237 Maple Street was a former community center with a large yard, perfect for the school I had described to Mr. Harrington that night. With Eleanor's guidance and Sophia's legal expertise, I navigated the complexities of zoning, licensing, and renovation. 2 years later, on a bright September morning, the Margaret Wilson Children's Center opened its doors to its first class of students, half-paying tuition that subsidized the half-attending on full scholarships. The building featured natural light classrooms, a garden where children grew vegetables, and an art studio inspired by the program that had once helped a grieving little girl named Maggie. Jessica and Brian both left the Silver Spoon to join the center's administration. My mother's health stabilized with proper medical care, and she became a beloved presence at the school, reading to the children when her strength allowed. The journey transformed me in ways I never expected. From a struggling waitress drowning in debt to an educational director responsible for children's futures and staff livelihoods. The money mattered, of course it did, but Mr. Harrington had been right about what truly changed my life: purpose. On the anniversary of our meeting, I visited his grave, bringing a handmade card from our students and a simple update on the center's progress. Standing there, I reflected on how quickly life can change, how a single encounter can alter everything if you're brave enough to follow where it leads. Maxwell Harrington's final act wasn't really about money at all. It was about belief, in me, in the power of education, in the ripple effect of kindness across generations. Now, every day, I get to pass that belief on to children who need someone to see their potential too. And in that way, a man I met only once continues to change lives long after he's gone. I've learned that wealth isn't measured by dollars in an account, but by lives touched and possibilities created. I've discovered strength I never knew I possessed and purpose that wakes me each morning with anticipation rather than dread. Most importantly, I've learned that we're all connected in ways we rarely see, that acts of kindness can echo across decades, returning when we least expect them but need them most. If my story has touched you in any way, I hope you'll carry forward your own circle of kindness. You never know how far it might travel or when it might return. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of unexpected connections, and remember that sometimes the most significant moments of our lives begin on the most ordinary days. Thank you for listening, and may you find your own purpose in the most unexpected places.